Hello and welcome. My name is Graham Spencer, and I'm here today to present to you the pairings of the Big Buddy Program, a Tennessee Department of Education program that seeks to support our districts that need support by allowing our districts that have excelled at educating our students on benchmark tests to support those districts. This is a completely fictitious program designed by my Quantitative 1 class at Belmont University, EDU 6720. But the purpose of this program, the Big Buddy program, is to ensure that all learners have a great educational experiences and utilize high-performing districts to support districts that are in need of support. Through this presentation, I will go through three aspects of the Big Buddy program. First, why this program and why now? Second, what does the pairing process look like? How do we determine what schools are excelling and what schools need more support? And then make those very delicate pairs of like schools. And then third, actually dive into those paired districts and look at how they got paired, why they got paired, and how this will make them find success. So, a little bit about the program. The Big Buddy program is going to pair high-performing schools with schools that need additional support to get our Tennessee scholars where they need to be. Specifically looking district-wide, our state has great teachers in great schools in great districts. This is the perfect time to utilize those things. We already see this in the Tennessee Best for All, where our state is pulling together resources from across the state to share with teachers to allow them to learn from teachers who are excelling at what they do. Also, you're hard-pressed to find a teacher or somebody who works for a district that does not believe in our kids and want what's best for our kids, our communities, and our teachers. This allows us to utilize our amazing capital that are these teachers, these districts, these district personnel, to support our other great districts in our own state. And ultimately, how do we do this? We pair our districts who are in need of support with the districts who are excelling in specific test areas. For the purpose of this program, we're going to look at math composite scores, English language arts composite scores, and U.S. history scores. And we use those scores to determine what schools are doing really well in those areas and what schools might need a little bit of support, and how do you find similar schools that are able to support each other. So the pairing process allowed us to partner underperforming districts with similar districts that are high-performing districts. What does it mean to be similar? Well, first off, we grouped them into size. We had three categories: small schools, about under 1,000, medium-sized schools between 1,000 and 10,000 students, and then large schools that were over 10,000. Small might have gone up to 2,000, but definitely under 2,000, medium between 2,000 and 10,000, and large above 10,000. We also looked at the number of economically disadvantaged students in each of these districts, as well as the racial diversity of the districts. We understand that a lot of what happens in a district and a lot of how a district is able to support its learners are through understanding the individual needs of that district. And so in matching districts with all of these similar characteristics, or at least partially similar, allows them to potentially find more resources and strategies that worked across districts. And it is also subject specific. So we looked at districts based on their math, their English language arts, and their U.S. history. So a district that is excelling in math might be the one receiving the support in English language arts, or vice versa, as well as U.S. history. So in terms of the math scores or schools, for the large counties, we partnered Sevier County, which is at the 70th percentile. They had a Z-score of 521 thousandths. With Marion County, that was at the 6th percentile with a Z-score of -1 and 572 thousandths. Both of those were very similar sized schools. Sevier County is at 14,662 students, whereas Marion has 12,724 students. These are as of 2020 data. Relatively similar socioeconomic status. You'll hear the same way we segmented into size with 0 to 2,000 students, 2,000 to 10,000, and above 10,000. Socioeconomic status worked in the same way. We segmented from 0 to 20%, from 20% to 50% roughly, and roughly 50% or above. The racial composite was very different between Sevier and Marion counties though. Sevier County had 20.2%, whereas Marion County had 10.7% students from diverse backgrounds. So we felt that that was still close enough where the SES and the size were so closely linked. The racial composition was close enough where Sevier County could really assist Marion County. In terms of our medium-sized schools, we had Johnson City, which is in the 96th percentile across the state for their math composite scores, with a Z-score of 1/728 thousandths. Who would be supporting McMinn County, which was at the 16th percentile, with a Z-score of -1 and 26 thousandths. Very similar sizes, more of a gap here, but you'll see that in the mid-range. Johnson City is at 8,098 students, whereas McMinn County is at 5,491 students. Their socioeconomic status, economically disadvantaged students, were very similar, 31 3/10 for Johnson City and 33 1/10 for McMinn County. The racial composite was relatively close. Johnson City was at 7 4/10%, whereas McMinn County was just over 14%. Very similar school districts, but as Z-scores and therefore percentiles on the complete opposite sides. We think these two school districts would be very apt to support each other. And then looking at our small counties, small school districts, we have Hollow Rock at Brewston, which is in the 76th percentile. Their Z-score was 719 thousandths, whereas Humboldt City Schools, which is at the 16th percentile, at 971 thousandths negative. Their size, a little bit different here, as was their racial composite, but both of them had very high socioeconomic status, economically disadvantaged students. So we'll start there. That was the driving force for this pairing. Besides the two Z-scores, their percentiles being very drastically different, Hollow Rock, Brewston being very high, Humboldt City being very low. Their socioeconomic status had 51 3/10 for Hollow Rock, Brewston, and 60 6/10 for Humboldt City. So that high socioeconomic status, we felt the size and the racial composition could be a little bit different, just because both of those schools had such economically disadvantaged, or so many economically disadvantaged students, they could find unique ways to support each other. The racial composition was at 14 7/10 for Hollow Rock, Brewston, and 78 1/10 for Humboldt City. Drastic change there, but in that in the small section, they were really drastically apart on the math percentiles, and with the combined such close economically disadvantaged numbers, we thought they'd be a really good match for each other. Moving on to our English language arts, we see Montgomery County being paired with Maury County for the large school districts. Montgomery County had a Z-score of 452 thousandths, which put them at the 67th percentile, whereas Maury County was at -1 and 24 hundredths in the negative, which placed them at the 10th percentile for their Z-score with the English language arts scores. Also very different sized schools. Montgomery County was a lot bigger, 36,577, whereas Maury County is at 13,040 students. But both of those fit within the picture of the large school district that we defined as over 10,000 students, so we felt comfortable putting them together, especially when you see the numbers for the next two. Our economically disadvantaged students from Montgomery County were at 26.5%, whereas in Maury County they're at 26%. Such close, similar size numbers for those economically disadvantaged students. And the racial composition was also very close, 48.5% for Montgomery County and 33 8/10% for Maury County. Overall, very drastic changes on the Z-scores, 67th percentile versus 11th percentile from Montgomery to Maury, and then almost identical economically disadvantaged students, both in the large category. We felt like that was a really good pair. Moving on to our medium-sized schools, Oak Ridge was at the 95th percentile with a Z-score of 1 64 hundredths, whereas McNary was at the 10th percentile with -1 and 279 thousandths. Very similar size. Oak Ridge is at 4,775 students, whereas McNary was only at 4,070. Not a big difference at all. Looking at about a 700 student difference, but when you're in that middle size range, it's not a huge difference. Socioeconomic status, they're within 8 percentage points. Oak Ridge had 24 6/10 economically disadvantaged students, 24 6/10% economically disadvantaged students, whereas McNairy County had 32 and 9/10% economically disadvantaged students. This is also the one instance where we'll see the supported school has a lower racial composition than the supporting school. McNairy was at a 10.5%, whereas Oak Ridge was at 31 and 4/10% racial composition. So, did not feel that our team did not feel that was a big enough deterrent, where those other data points lined up so well and in such favor of those two schools being paired together. In terms of our small schools, Hancock was the top school in the state, with an enrollment of 976 students. Very high SES, 50 and 6/10% of their students are economically disadvantaged, so over half of their students are economically disadvantaged. But you'll see on the flip side of that, there's not a lot of diversity, only 1 9/10, so just under 2% of their students are racially composited. The Z-score for Hancock, just so we throw that out there, is 2 and 855 thousandths. Hancock, that top school in the state for English Language Arts Composite, is being paired with a school at the 25th percentile, the West Carroll Special School District. Their Z-score was negative 639 thousandths. Their size, super similar to Hancock. They're at 940 students, whereas Hancock was at 976. Their economically disadvantaged students are at 39.5%, and their racial composition is at 16 and 7/10%. So biggest difference there was definitely that racial composition, but the very close pairing, socioeconomic status, as well as the size, especially being paired with that top district in the state, will really support West Carroll Special District. Jumping into our U.S. history, we have our large district providing the support of Knox County. They are in the 88th percentile for U.S. history across the state, with a Z-score of 1 and 16/100ths, and enrollment of 61,526. Very different enrollment size from Maury County, which had the 7th percentile, Z-score of negative 1.512, negative 1 and 512 thousandths. Their enrollment is just 13,040, but that does still fit within our large school category of over 10,000 people, 10,000 students. And we felt with such a drastic change in the Z-scores, they almost mirrored each other, positive to negative. They would be a great fit for each other. The SES, socioeconomic status of economically disadvantaged, Knox County is at 26 and 3/10%, whereas Maury County is at 26%. Very close there. Also, the racial makeup is very similar. 31 and 4/10% of Knox County students versus 33 and 8/10 from Maury County. So very similar on the diversity, racial diversity, as well as the socioeconomic status. The size, still both in the large category, even though they're on opposite ends of the top 10 districts in the state. Still not only within the over 10,000, within the top 10 or 11 districts in the state. Great fit for each other. Moving into our medium district, we have Polk County at the 94th percentile with a Z-score of 1 and 614 thousandths, being paired up to provide support to Lenore City, which is at the 8th percentile with a Z-score of negative 1 and 362 thousandths. Biggest difference here is the racial diversity. Polk County is sitting at 4%, which is very low. It almost was too low for us to consider pairing the two together. But Lenore City was just at a 13.5%. So both of those were under 20%. We felt like it was an okay enough match on that, especially when you see the other two similarities line up. The economically disadvantaged students in Polk County are at 36.5%, whereas in Lenore City they're at 37.5%, so within a percentage there. And the size, both in the 2000s, Polk County at 2,266 and Lenore City at 2,336. Our small districts have our South Carroll district at the 1st percentile, being supported by Bradford at the 69th percentile. Bradford's Z-score is at 504 thousandths, whereas South Carroll's is at negative 2 and 70 hundredths, so -2 and 7/10. Both in those small district size. Bradford is double the size at 607 students, whereas South Carroll is at 348 students. The SES, socioeconomic status, is close. Bradford is at 32 and 1/10%. South Carroll is actually below that at 25 and 3/10%. It is the only other pairing where the supported school is at a lower socioeconomic status, still within that range of the 20 to 50% SES status. And the racial diversity is at 5 and 1/10% for Bradford and 11 and 9/10% for South Carroll. So within about 6 points there, 7 points there. So all of these pairings have been made where the school size, the socioeconomic status, and the racial diversity are very similar between the supporting district and the supported district. There is some variance, but you'll notice that in order to find a good mix of high percentiles and low percentiles, or high Z-scores and low Z-scores, there was a little bit of leeway within some of those other demographics. However, blending those four data points together, we found some really good matches that we think will support these districts learning and growing from each other. So just as we wrap up, some things for us to remember as we hope all of these districts find success. Both the supporting districts and the supported districts can learn from each other and have some great growth together. First is each district is different. These paired districts can work together to find success, but the supporting district cannot just dictate things for the supported district. There may be things that they have to tweak or they might like but not be able to implement. So they can work together to find success. There can't be any dictation. Likewise, we're hopeful that the supporting districts will also find out that they are growing from the supported districts. Whether it's they have learned from another area of success from that supported district, or they've just taken away some great things that that district's doing that the supporting district will be able to implement themselves as well. We really took heart to find like districts to match, so we didn't just go with the highest and the lowest Z-score, the highest and lowest percentile in each size range. We really looked in depth at looking at the racial makeup, the economic disadvantage percentages, and the size. And then we did want to make sure we considered those individual areas of strength. So one of the schools one of the districts that's doing really well in the math composite might not have done so well in all three, whereas we saw some schools that were considered to be on the supported list that had a really high area in one of the three math tests. So even some of the supported districts that have a high point in one of those three areas can learn from that and support the supporting districts, can support themselves and grow that area of strength. And it is really important for the whole entire Tennessee Department of Education to emphasize that we are staying focused on our students through this process. It is not district versus district. It is not teacher versus teacher. Our teachers are all here for our students, like our districts are here for our teachers and our students. And our Tennessee Department of Education loves to support our teachers and our students because our students are the reason we do what we do. So we're really hopeful that this Big Buddy program will allow all of our districts to learn and grow from each other, and we hope to expand it from these 9 districts to about 27 districts next year and 52 districts the year after. We'd really love to end up with every district partnering with another district in some area or another, because there's things that every district can learn from another, and there's things that every district can teach another. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for this fictitious program brought to you by our Quantitative 1 Methods course, Belmont EDU 6720. I hope you have a great night. Thank you so much.